We're storytelling animals. It's hardwired into us, and we're all born with an innate storytelling ability. In their pretend play, toddlers as young as 2 and 3 years old create elaborately constructed dramas which they act out in all of the voices of the characters which they make up. And these dramas that they construct are not just about polite chit-chat at dolls' tea parties. They're positively existential. They reflect a world that's often dark and dangerous, like the worlds in the fairy stories that they so often love to be told. So stories are the way that we first begin to make sense of the world around us and to construct the world around us. They're kind of the stars that we navigate by from a very early age, and their lessons can be deep and very rich and very memorable. Gold is never a good goal. Always, there may be a door to another world. Learn to look for it. Never, ever try to maim yourself by squeezing your foot into a glass slipper that was constructed for somebody else. Always leave a trail of breadcrumbs to find your way out of the dark forest. And most important of all, never, ever take off your skin and leave it unattended. The characters in stories can be great learning tools for us as well. And I think when I was a child, I probably learned more from the characters and stories than I did from the people around me. And I loved the very solitary heroines who always won through against all of the impossible odds. My favourite fairy tale in the world, I think at the time, was Hans Christian Andersen's story of the Wild Swans. I'm not sure whether you know that story. It's about a princess called Eliza, whose brothers are turned into swans by the inevitable wicked stepmother. And she is the only one that can save them. And the only way that she can save them is she has to go into graveyards in the dark of the night and with her bare hands pluck stinging nettles. And from the stinging nettles, she must strip the fibres, spin the fibres into yarn, weave shirts from the yarn, one for each brother, and then when the brothers put the shirts on, they'll be transformed back into men again. Now, as if this wasn't enough, she has to do all of this while remaining completely silent. She may not tell her story to anybody under any circumstances. Because of this silence and her proclivity for hanging around graveyards in the dark of night, she's almost burnt at the stake by a very suspicious bishop. Happily, just as the fire's lit under her, her brothers in the form of swans come swooping in and save her, just at the time when she in turn saves them by casting a shirt over each brother, and each brother, in turn, is transformed back into a man again, all except the last brother, because she hasn't had time to finish his shirt. So he's always half man and half swan. That story captured my imagination in so many ways I hardly know where to begin. It taught me that transformation always comes from the prickly, the stinging things, that no matter how close you get to burning, help may still come, and that even today, a nettle is never just a nettle to me. It's still a symbol of all the things that might be possible, even when all hope is gone. So the tasks that have to be undertaken in these stories that we grow up with are not just the stuff that shirts are made of, but they're the stuff that souls are made of. They show us a different way of being in the world, a world that is very, very rich with enchantment. And we've always told stories as well that explain how the world is. Since the dawn of human civilization, we've sat around campfires, we've gathered in huts and royal palaces to tell each other stories about how the world came to be as it is today and what our place in it is. And these explanatory stories are called myths. And myths deal with very weighty matters. They deal with gods and heroes, with the creation of the universe, with the meaning and purpose of life, all of that kind of thing. And myths, because of this explanatory value, underpin the beliefs and morals of civilizations. They're kind of the guiding mythologies, if you like, the guiding narratives that we live by, which is curious when you think that we often use the word myth today to mean a falsehood. And all cultures, whether they recognize it overtly or not, have these guiding narratives that we live by, these guiding mythologies. And they're not always religious mythologies or narratives. They can be secular too. So let's just take an example of a couple of those that I think are underpinning the way that we view our civilization today. First of all, there's the myth of more. And this is a myth of progress. More, everything. This is a myth that tells us that every generation has to have more stuff than the generation before. Has to have bigger houses, better jobs, bigger cars, has to live longer, has to be more beautiful. It tells us that we have to produce more stuff all the time and consume that stuff, because if we do, apparently, we're told, we will be happier and healthier. And if we don't, the economy will stop growing. And who knows what terrible things might happen if the economy stops growing. So we're locked into this strange dystopian story where all of the characters in it are called consumers, and where those characters are defined by what they buy. But what if we stepped out of that story for a while and asked ourselves if that was really the story that we wanted to be in? Asked ourselves if instead we didn't want to think of a story that made us, rather than paddling in the shallows of more, made us delve more deeply into the well of the world that we already have and the things that we already have. Then there's the myth of the hero. And this is kind of tied up with the myth of more, because today's heroes, a little bit different from heroes of the past, today's heroes, they're not just about being the best that they can be, they're about being better than other people. And you see this all the time in today's books and movies. You see it particularly in myths where you have superheroes, because everybody wants to be more powerful, more special than everybody else. Vampires are the new superhero, it seems. We've kind of grown out a little bit of Batman and Superman. And teenagers all over the world who want to be more special than their peers want to be vampires. Everybody wants to be Harry Potter. Nobody wants to be a muggle. And so this is a result of an underlying narrative in our culture which encourages us to be individualistic and competitive and always to want more of everything. So what would a post-heroic story look like? What would that look like? If we could find a story that enmeshed us more deeply in the world, rather than putting us above it, outside of it, looking down on it from a point of privilege. The post-heroic story is about learning to live more deeply in the world we have now. It's not about individuality and competition. It's about building community and recognizing diversity. So in the post-heroic story, you don't want to slay the dragon. You want to make the dragon part of your team with his unique fire-breathing skills. It's a story in which you leave your own stomach half empty so that you can give half of your bowl of porridge to the starving mice. And then, someday along the line, the mice might come and help you sort the wheat from the chaff. In the post-heroic story, you don't necessarily go straight and get the hand of the golden-haired, simpering princess. You stand up tall and you face the blue-faced, boar-tusked, stinking hag, and you kiss her. Those are the post-heroic stories. Post-heroic stories are not stories of more, they're stories of when we have had enough. Like the beautiful old Irish story of the Glasgavlin, the cow of plenty. This was a cow whose milk was so plentiful that she could feed the whole land of Ireland, and she would wander around the country, and she would allow each person who wanted it to come with a single pail and to fill the pail with her milk. Until one day, a greedy woman brought a sieve and many pails. And because the sieve was never full, she filled pail after pail after pail through the sieve until the cow's milk ran dry. And then the Glasgavlin ran off, disappeared, and was never seen again in the Isle of Ireland. And post-heroic stories are not about strength, they're about compassion. Like the beautiful old European stories of the Grail, where the knight who is on a quest for the Grail must ask a question in order to attain the Grail, and to heal the wound of the Fisher King, and to heal the wasteland that the world has become. And the question that the knight must ask is a very simple, pointed, what ails thee? It doesn't matter what the answer is. It's not about answers in the post-heroic story. It's about knowing the right question to ask, a question of compassion. So these are the stories which offer us more enriching values by which to live. But the thing is, most of us don't necessarily think of things like progress and heroism as underpinning cultural mythologies. It's not really presented to us that way. It's presented to us as not as a story, that we can pick or choose, but as how the world actually is. But how the world is, according to those mythologies of progress, more, heroism, is really good only for the wealthy and most powerful people on the planet. It's not particularly great for the starving millions in the desert countries, and it's certainly no good for the animals who are caught up in the 6th mass extinction of life on this planet, because our underlying cultural mythologies are literally costing the earth. They're not doing us very much good either, because although we're certainly richer than the generation before us, we're certainly not happier, and you can see that in all the mental health statistics in this country very, very clearly. And the myths that each of us lives by are personal myths. The stories we tell about ourselves and our place in the world are played out within the framework of that cultural mythology. So if the guiding mythology of our culture is rich and nourishing, then it inspires us, it gives us meaning. But if our cultural mythology becomes arid and heartless, then we in turn become alienated and rootless. If you can no longer live by the cultural mythology, the guiding cultural mythology, the stories that previous generations happily told about themselves, if you think that that's failed and that it's not adequate, then in a sense you fall out of myth. And to fall out of myth is to fall out of meaning, because above all, myth is about meaning. Change begins always with imagination, and I think it begins primarily with a mythic imagination, with the ability to reimagine stories that are better, stories that help us to see our place in the world differently, that entwine us and mesh us back into the web of life on this planet rather than standing above it. And so if the myth that is underpinning our culture is failing, let's transform it. Why not? Humans have always been myth-making creatures. And Carl Jung once said that if the cultural mythology is dying, if it's proving itself to be inadequate for the needs of the people and the planet, then the myth-making power resides in individuals. That the birth of a new personal myth in the imagination of one individual or a group of individuals can literally spread and change the world. So it's the people that I like to call the mythical misfits who kickstart the transformation of culture, because they reimagine stories which help us to fall in love with the world all over again. The stories which re-enchant us, which re-enchant our children, and which re-enchant the world. And the stories which help us to reimagine ourselves and our children and the world. So when the great blazing bonfire of a civilization begins to flicker and die, a few individual flames usually remain. And when those flames get a little bit of air to them and begin to lean in towards each other, then they can start a new fire. So, with the sparks of our own mythic imagination, let's kindle that fire. Thank you.